Mike aloha in hulu manalike ole.
And everybody got to use their big voice.
I'm gonna use my big voice, okay. About 30 years ago, I was on the radio, on the Hawaii Public Radio. And one of the discussions I was contemplating was colonization and decolonization. Big words. But how do you break it down? What does it mean? A Filipino guy called me. His name is Virgilio Enriquez, and it's all in the paper that I have in front of you. Virgilio is a professor of psychology, or was a professor of psychology at the University of the Philippines. And he was trying to show the integrity of native science because it's always compared with Western science and downgraded. And he was saying, hey, no way. Indigenous science is just as valid and in fact oftentimes more valid because they have to be proven over and over again by the indigenous communities. And so his position was to organize indigenous professors at the University of the Philippines and from wherever he could get them to show that indigenous science was valid. That was an interesting approach that he took, but he said, how is it that you are coming out with this theory of decolonization in as if you're a psychologist, but you're not, you're a lawyer. I'm a psychologist and I'm coming out with a different theory of colonization, and so I'd like to share it with you. So I said, right on. So I invited him to my radio program, did extensive interviews with him, and I thought his theory of colonization was very valid. Every time he mentioned something, it's like I get a kick in the okole because I never thought about it that way, colonization, and how he, as an indigenous person from the Philippines, had seen it. Now remember that this Filipino is very much, and I guess all the Philippines are very much Catholics. And so you can see the colonization process by the Catholics, not only in the Philippines, but throughout Central and South America. So I'm going to read from the paper because it's well written, because I wrote the paper. So whether you like it or not, you're going to have to put up with my reading of this of this paper. It's called Process of Decolonization, and if you want to go and find it for yourself, it's in my website at hawaiianperspective.org, www.hawaiianperspectives.org, and then go into the process of colonization and decolonization, and then you can find this kind of thick paper, but the paper is well worth it, and that's why I'm going to just read from it. Colonization and decolonization are social processes, even more than they are political processes. Governance over a people change only after the people themselves have sufficiently changed. Here is presented the observations of Professor of Psychology and advocate for the integrity of native wisdoms, Virgilio Enriquez, a native son of the Philippines, on the process of colonization. The contribution from Professor Enriquez is taken from his discussion with the author in Laenui, Hawaii, in the mid-1990s. Only portions of these discussions were recorded. Professor Enriquez has since passed on. He died of cancer in California. The author confesses to having repeated, expanded, and expounded on this conversation over the years. The process of decolonization described here follows that of colonization. This process is based on the author, my observations of the individual Hawaii experience and those of others as they move from one to the next phase. the broader societal experience ongoing in Hawaii, as well as his understanding of the events which have and continue to take place in the Pacific region and the rest of the world. Okay, so here we go. On the process of colonization, Professor Enriquez has suggested the following steps in the process of colonization. Step number one, denial and withdrawal. When a colonial people first come upon an indigenous people, the colonial strangers will immediately look upon the indigenous as a people without culture, no moral values, nothing of any social value to merit kind comment. Thus, the colonial people deny the very existence of a culture of any merit among the indigenous people. Indigenous people themselves, especially those who develop a closer relationship with the newcomers, gradually withdraw from their own cultural practices. Some may even join in the ridicule and the denial of the existence of culture among the native people. They may become quickly converted and later lead in the criticism of the indigenous societies. Can you reflect on any Hawaiians who have associated with, let's say, the Christians or others who were very critical of Hawaiian beliefs and concepts and conduct and joined in the criticism? And that's one of the processes of colonizing the Hawaiians. When you associate oftentimes with a very high elite class, and then you find that some of the elite class comes across and they themselves are very critical of the Hawaiians. Look at them, they don't understand English. Look at what they're doing. They're practicing these kinds of prayers, and they expect that these akulele are actually gods. And so they join in the criticism. And when they join in the criticism, then the other Hawaiians start looking at, hey, what's happening here? I thought this was part of the leadership of our community, and they themselves are criticizing the behavior of the people themselves. So it's a general practice, not only common among Hawaiians, but it goes on in the Philippines, it goes on in Central and South America by this kind of association. And oftentimes through that type of criticism, the colonization of the people takes a bigger step. It moves further forward. Indigenous people themselves, especially those who develop a closer relationship with the newcomers, gradually withdraw from their own cultural practices. Some may even join in the ridicule and in the denial of the existence of culture among the native people. So they talk about how terrible they are, that they don't want culture, and they continue to depress the Hawaiian or the indigenous people. The step number 2, he says, is destruction and eradication. The colonists take bolder action in step 2, physically destroying and attempting to eradicate all physical representations of the symbols of indigenous cultures. They may include the burning of their art, their tablets, their god images, the destruction of their sacred sites, etc. At times, the indigenous people themselves may participate in this destruction. Some may even lead in the destruction. Anything familiar in that general description, that general process? I see all your heads nodding, but nobody like talk about what happened.
Yeah, the temple was broken on, all the temples and all these was all destroyed.
Oftentimes we blame the howlies for the destruction of our cultural values. But in this case, let's face it, what are the facts? Ka'ahumanu. All of this happened before the Christians came, before their arrival. Although some people say, oh, it was suggested that they probably would arrive maybe 2 or 3 years hence. But that's not necessarily the facts, is it? Unless somebody went sneak across to Ka'ahumanu and said, oh, the Christians are going to be arriving soon because they're coming from Boston. We had Hawaiians in Boston already knew about it. Did we?
The one.
One, yeah. But he was monkey in Boston, right? Who else? The son of, who was that? The king of Kauai? Who? So anyway, they were, but we didn't have telegraph. Maybe we had mental telepathy.
Oh, yeah, we did have that.
Huh? Maybe we had that. I don't know. But they never arrived until what? 2 years later.
What year are you looking at?
They arrived first in Kauai, the missionaries.
Yeah, what year are we talking? 1820?
1820.
25?
About there, 1820, they left Boston. They arrived 1821, 1822. When was the battle at Kumamo'o?
Right after 1819, yeah?
1819?
Yeah, was right after Fayel's death.
Okay. Okay. So shall we continue? So destruction and eradication. But did that really destroy the religion of old Hawaii? The burning of who was that? Who's that? God. Kukailimoku. Or was it still being practiced in the outer regions of Hawaii? In many places, even within Kona and that whole area. So one destruction, one burning of one tiki, was that the eradication of the Hawaiian religion?
No.
Why not?
Still that, my understanding, still at Kupuna that went underground and they're still in Ho'omau, Nameha, but it's still in Ho'omau.
Oh yeah?
The religion.
How can you say that out here in Waianae?
The existence of all of the hail that's still here.
Because
You
it
know, so
continues.
because it continued. Like recently we were into Ni'oeula, like it's a pretty intact heiau. And then if you go to Kaniaki, you go to where else?
Punanaula.
Punanaula, you know, the
Mhm.
existence of all of these
Kalehua.
places of worship are still here. So that was one of the questions that I asked is like, wow, you know, we're so taught to think that everything was destroyed when in fact these places of worship still existed. Number two, the question that I asked was, did they find any ki'i out here? Did they find any aumakua, especially up in Lualuale? And yes, they did. So we don't have any relationship with the ki'i or any of the artifacts because it's held by the Navy. You know, so it's something that we need to take a look at.
Okay. Every time you see a akualele flying across the valley, and what do? We deny the existence of the traditional religion of Hawaii. So it's not contained in any material resource, but there is a sense. Every time we tell stories of night marchers, or we tell stories of whatever stories we talk about, number one, we admit the existence, and number two, there's a sense of continuity, ho'omau, of old Hawaiian religion. So it's an interesting battle that is going on, even today in Hawaii, as we ole to open our meetings, or as we close our meetings. And yet, there's that sort of interesting dance between Christianity and traditional Hawaiian religion. Okay, so that's the second step, destruction, eradication, which is not necessarily so, and in Hawaii we have to reflect on what's happening. Next is denigration, belittlement, and insult. Step number 3 from Virgilio Enriquez. As colonization takes a stronger hold, the new systems which are created within indigenous societies, such as churches, colonial-style health delivery systems, and new legal institutions, will all join to denigrate, belittle, and insult any continuing practice of the indigenous cultures. Churches will style indigenous religious practices as devil worship and condemn the practitioners to physical torture or their souls to hell. Colonially trained medical practitioners will refer to the indigenous doctors as witches in their medicine, if their medicine is successful, and ignorant, superstitious fools if their medicine fails. The new legal institutions will criminalize the traditional practices, fine the practitioners, and may declare illegal the possession of traditionally sacred or healing materials. Notice the commonality throughout indigenous societies and what we today face in Hawaii, the whole discussion of whether or not, what do you call it, the people who assist in the hanau process and
Palakiki.
yeah, all of those, it's still going on in our society. But that's another stage of colonization, of how they claim the legitimacy over that area, pass a law, make it illegal, or the churches may move in and criminalize it or condemn it. Isn't it an interesting battle that goes on in our societies? And oftentimes we don't see it.
So I wanted to ask, so the topic of all the ways that well in this case we're talking about like the old religions and how that the shift to Christianity and the ways that the internalized racism kind of takes a hold. How and Kalehua, maybe you can reflect on this too, like how is it that the revival, maybe in the more normalization of traditional practices has contributed to this the shift to we are not American? How is that like? I'm trying to figure out how to articulate this.
Influencing?
Like, how is it?
How is it influencing?
How is it influencing like how people interpret we are not American in practice? If that makes sense, or I can rephrase maybe, but yeah, just curious about what your thoughts are on the influence of reclaiming old practices in deoccupation and deoccupying the mind kind of things.
Kalehua.
Well, I think, like, I don't want to jump ahead, but because in the action seems like there are active pieces to the decolonization process, and in the introduction, I think you brought up revitalizing the Hawaiian language shapes the way, reshapes the way that a human thinks, because language is directly connected to the ideological values that you carry through life, and it shapes the lens through which you see and engage with the world, not just history or the world in its present form, but it's the way you see the future as well. So language, but going back to like the idea of the religion, there are still principles at play, because when we do tell stories, like Anakala was talking about, because I like the process that he's asking us for reflection, that when you were told stories by your parents or grandparents about anything religious, akualele, I remember my grandmother, who was a prophet in a Christian church that was a subsect of Kiakua Mauloa, become terrified of akualele. And she was the first person who would actually tell me about the aikukai and the pela pela that goes to, if you see that, do this. And so just for me, extracting from that conversation, you extract the fear. Fear equals what? As a reflective question. Fear equals that in the consciousness of this indigenous person, that there's something still very real about it. So while saying, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that, I'm not gonna name my kids Hawaiian names, the conversation about that still is being examined by Kupuna, and I think by us, is that many folks stepped away from naming with Hawaiian language names for fear. So the fear is still there, which to me still indicates this conscious, subconscious, recognition that there's something still there. And so that has never gone away. Because if the stronghold of Christianity actually existed, there is no fear left, because there are no other gods but He. So if there is a reality to the rules of the dogma of religion, then the fear doesn't exist. So when I hear fear, when I see fear, when I recognize fear in the stories of my own family and my own kupuna, I recognize the continuity. So therefore, when I tattoo my body, when I speak my language, when I wear my traditional clothing, when we enter into sacred spaces like Heya, when we chant, when we dance, there is still, you can still access those spaces with a very deep sense of reality, because our ancestors deemed that reality so through their fear. Now their fear is, to me, is just recognition of reality. I don't have to possess that fear, which I think is where I'll answer. That's the question. Is that when you mitigate through your own processes, because we have access to ideas like agnosticism and atheism and other religions, so we can access the realm of religious possibilities that come from our species. With that information, we can make a very intellectual decision in how we juggle what we do from here on out. If that makes sense. Because that's where I think that conversation would where my mind would be taken, is understanding Ka'ahumanu, and it's just my the Battle of Kuamo'o and Kekua Kalani's death symbolized something really significant. However, if you look at the continuum, and I think I said that before in a presentation, Kona was kapu. Entirety of the moku, and it was Haumia and Hauka'e, and that's where Lioliho wasn't in Kona because of that, after the death of his father. Now, you have traditional practices and processes that would have taken place, like a kalai aina. You would have had the ho'oleva, you would have had the cleansing of the moku, you would have had all of that take place. And in fact, the ainoa, so we think about the falling of the aikapu. I always throw it out there, is that in a time after the death of a significant chief, all of the subsequent lower chiefs begin to Ainoa as a part of the Kumakena, which is the funeral process, the grieving process. So it didn't signify the Ainoa. It didn't signify the fall of the Aikapu. I think the messaging from the missionary perspective was commandeered. And then those Christians that have converted within our people commandeered the narrative. And you commandeer the narrative because you're seeing, oh, I know. And you're not talking about alcohol. You're not talking about the death of Kamehameha, which significantly affects the way that we act. And that's a traditional practice to Aino. So, I mean, you guys understand that even now, all I would say is, in a traditional sense, we could still claim that we are in the grieving process of Kamehameha. We have not stopped grieving because we Ainoa. Not as the fall of a Aikapu, not as the demise of a religion, but the continuation of a grieving process, which makes sense because he held values and mantras that are very important to our well-being, if that makes sense. And the Kalaiaina is still has to happen, which I'll say could be labeled as independence. And those are all traditional labels to traditional processes still in play if we believe in those things.
The idea is the same, the language is different.
But reconstituting how we conscientize what took place is a part of that, I would say.
Wow.
That's what I say. It's like,
Muy interesante. Anyone else want to make any further contributions?
Reflection.
So I was born and raised in Ho'omana, Keokuola. Papa John Wise was the theater of Keokuola, Kamakua Maloa. I was fourth generation. So I grew up in Kaulelo, Keokua. Grew up in the Baibala and knowing the stories, but those stories, that wasn't our stories. You know, so I remember sharing with Kalehua some years back when I was conflicted, you know, because I don't go Halepuli. My Halepuli is up in our Ka'ala and our Lo'i every Sunday, you know, but because I was raised up in Christianity, although Yeshua never did me any wrong, I still have aloha for Yeshua. But I come from our people that get deep hurt, and I see Christianity, I see religion as a way to keep us in bondage. You know, so I was sharing with Kalehua, like, man, I was conflicted with that, you know, because, you know, fourth generation, I wish my mom was as fervent as she was to us getting to Halepule every Sunday as to this Olelo Hawaii to me. You know, but I still recovering from that. You know, and when I see, you know, because I look at the Western narrative and everything is dominated by Christian values and by everything that is not Kanaka. So I get this constant battle, you know, and sometimes I just get turned off when I hear, you know, but that's my journey, you know, and I'm still healing from that, but I could see that process, that, you know, colonization and you know, what was passed down. And I seen Christianity work too. I mean, the faith. You know, my grandfather, when my niece was born, she had something like lupus or something, but nobody could go into ICU room. And she was like only 2 days she was living, you know. And I see my grandfather just go in, touch the glass and just pull it. Next day a baby came out, you know. So I seen the works of the faith in Christianity, but also coming from pure-blooded Kanaka, you know. So I still battle about this.
Isn't that battle the same battle many of us face in the concept of absolutes? It's all this way or all that way. Well, what about the in-between, the grays, and, you know, feeling and working it out, which was more Hawaiian style rather than necessarily the absolutes? You know, and some of our own challenges today. You know, even the so-called Christians who are not going to walk over a certain area or there is some reality to noho, when the spirit sits on a person who just went walk through the grave or a place that not supposed to have walked through and all that kinds of stuff. There's still value in our kupuna and their processes of ho'oponopono in the prayers and all that stuff. And then the next day they all Christians. My wife had a grandmother who was very strong Christian, who led in the Kalehua church, had a special pew for her. And yet she conducted her ho'oponopono at home. And so my wife asked, but Grandma, isn't this sort of not supposed to be? You get one room only for your Hawaiian gods and the other room for Christian God? And didn't we just hear that this is not supposed to be? She said, shh. That we get 2 rooms so they don't fight. Practical, and it worked out. And we all have that kind of experience, yeah?
And I would say too that that's something that shows up like across the board, like through Indian country and through other traditions, where it's like there's obviously people are reckoning in their own way, in their own time, with the indoctrinations and the Christianizations and the just all of the traumas over hundreds of years. But that's one of the things that when people go through ceremony, that they have to, or people are really careful to separate what are the traditions that folks are doing, whether they're doing like, traditional ways on the reservation, or it's traditional ways like in Hulu traditions, that there are times and place to call on certain powers that be to intervene in this situation here. But then if we're gonna go through another genealogy, through another context, in another situation, then we call on some other force that can intervene in this case here. And so so very careful not to like mix ceremonies, but also acknowledging that sometimes the medicine you need is gonna come from some other source. And so the spirits that are called in certain kinds of ceremonies are not, the spirits that are called in certain kinds of ceremonies are not necessarily the kind that get along with those other kinds of spirits. And so being really mindful of the powers that are intervening or interceding on your behalf is something that's talked about. So.
Yeah. Sorry, real quick, and it's only that 'cause when you're talking about, because the fight, the internal fight psychologically, it's a really important one, and I think climbing that mountain is the decolonization process. I mean, I think there's a political side that has to take place too. That's not my wheelhouse, so I'm not gonna talk too much about the legal side or the international law side. But getting to that point. And recognizing that the fight it's important, but it's also taking up a lot of your time. The inability to mitigate that keeps you locked in internal struggle, and it still manifests the same output of colonization, which is a stale, stalled indigenous person. Because I would say it's just as bad as alcoholism. Getting locked in the fight, because it takes you out of the battle, because you're always questioning every little decision. And so I mean, even for me, it's like having the 2 rooms is a good way to think. Because so I always sequence it like, and it could just be, I mean, we all make up our own rationalization, so take it with a grain of sand. But for those who were raised in the stories of the Bible, you can identify that in the beginning there were people here. It wasn't just Adam and Eve. Right. Or else we'd be calling out incest, and we're not, because there were other people that were there. And so because you have that identifying marker historically in the documentation, that the Christian story is the continuation of the story, and I always talk about like the anthropomorphic nature of the snake in the garden, that's characteristic of indigenous belief, that animals talk. And in the Bible, not many animals talk. Maybe the bush talk, but in the stories, that anthropomorphism dissolved at the meeting with the snake. And so that by learning the indigenous stories that we come from, that's the first half of the proverbial Bible of our humanity, that you still can read through the Christian doctrine and extract some internal very human-centric lessons from it. But if you take the entirety of that, the continuity of the story, all with like I said, with a grain of salt or sand, salt, whatever one it is. It's small. Because it's rebooting the idea that all of these stories are just derivatives of humanity all over the world. And it's just our version of a human process. So don't get locked up in it and learn the lessons through it, because you have to puka out of it to be able to begin the process of what now what, the action part, I think.
So that would be my question in terms of the suggestion that the I couple has. We are in Ainoa, and so the ceremony has continued from.
Outside voice.
You have to speak a bit louder because people cannot hear you.
Okay, the ceremony has continued into this time and space. So what is the process of ending the ceremony? So we return back to the couple so that we can achieve all of the grandeur that our being Kanaka is about.
So this is gonna sound very anticlimactic.
Okay,
That it's not about the return to it.
okay.
It's about the recognition of it. Because from here on out, we've already seen, so this guy, Nietzsche, the death of God. There's already a recognition, even in Western philosophy, that God's dying. The concept of God is dying. And even in a Hawaiian sense, it's not so much just a return to the details of the religions. It's really extracting what were the religions in place to teach us. What was the core wisdom? Because, and just as an example, a return to looking at nature with an increased significance and awe will guide, as a lawmaker, will guide you to different types of laws that are not so exploitive or extractive of nature. Okay. So it's really at the highest level, because you can begin the advocacy shifts immediately. You don't need to go, oh, now I gotta go read Malo about Makahiki, and I gotta learn Makahiki, and we gotta turn the Heiau back on, use the Ahasa. You don't have to go back to the weeds of the religion. Learn about it, and there are people, it's important, because you can continue the process of better understanding why all the details were significant. But you're never ever gonna get there in time to advocate immediately. So to advocate immediately, you extract this high level understanding that nature should be treated as God, and I should behave as though I believe that that's true. Yeah. That's psychological.
And that is true to the practice of our kupuna, is that nature had held a high level of being akua.
And they behaved as such, and they decided how to use the earth and live as a part of the earth with that understanding. Because that's the main point. And getting to, like, I want to say, conversion. For one traditional Hawaiian would have been like, oh, one more God, yeah, shoot. Jesus, shoot, bring him on.
Right.
I don't think it would have went down like you think the Christian narrative actually was. Oh, we're gonna just give up everything and go right to. How do you, in a psychology of that time, how do you come from a pantheon of deities to immediately saying, oh, I understand monotheism? It just isn't. It's just not ingrained in the psychological, the behaviors of a Hawaiian at the moment. It would have been, they would have to work through, like, okay, what the hell does that mean? Damn, that's difficult. That's really, especially if you're older in age. So it would have been more like, oh, there's another God coming. Okay. And then everybody's dying, and the people who believe in that God aren't dying, so maybe I'll try it out. Because you have, and you have stories like Kavelo, where before he decides to go, and it's from our moku, he decides here with these two gods, which one will come with him to Kauai, and which one going to stay. He had made a decision in the moment between gods.
That's how it is. That's how it is in Yoruba culture too, like West African cultures. Is that if the god is not working, change it out. Like get like literally just So, and I was gonna add too that from the like to the thing about Christianity and like the internal struggle. I'm so glad I finally read this book I've been meaning to read called Zealot. It's a Iranian man who wrote it. I wish I could remember his name. I think Ravi. But this book Zealot, maybe 7-8 years ago, was published. But it's a really interesting telling of the historical Jesus, and explains the political context of the time and how these stories all came to be, how these aspects of the Bible came to be what they are now, and basically shows how Jesus, the historical person who was like a Jewish nationalist and preached about overthrowing empire and doing right by your neighbor, basically got co-opted in this certain kind of way, and then turned into this figure that then became a weapon for empire. And so I think being able to parse out that where the Jewish tradition actually was at that time, and where Jesus, the person, fit into that longer history of prophets and would-be saviors in that genealogy is, to me, was super fascinating, and I think can be helpful in pulling apart those internal contradictions that are actually, I think, more so a function of the way that the church as an institution indoctrinates people, and has much less to do with the actual reality of who this person even was and what the meaning of this person's life was in the context of that time, in the long history of people who were in that same position as a prophet or as a teacher.
It takes a lot of internal kind of realization to begin to break away from that type of understanding, because again, many of our kupuna are not ali'i, that weren't free thinkers. They followed what was being told, and so the assumption that we're all free thinkers is kind of like different, you know.
Yeah,
When
we're
in
not all sitting around
I think
contemplating
now
together.
we've entered into a direction in life where individualism is about free thinking, whereas collective thinking was where we come from. And so not everybody had the same mana, not everybody had the same kuleana, you know. For me personally, never raised in a Christian church. You know, my grandparents converted to Buddhism, which is totally different from, and a lot of ohana in Nanakuli became Buddhists. Why? That's the question I asked. Why? And then you understand the 40,000 gods, and you understand everything, all aspects of the universe, and the potential that everything and anything is possible. You know, so like that dilemma does not work for me. So I'm looking at like, how do we really build a strong pathway forward for our people who are suffering, really suffering in this time, and are not free thinkers, you know, that would just accept that they're going to follow certain individuals into spaces that will help them overcome whatever challenges they're going through. Yeah.
Joe had a question. You had a question?
Well, I was gonna bring it back down to step 3 when you was talking about that, integration and battlement. I think when we looked at the issues of language in our Aulelo, I hear my dad always tell his stories. He was banned from speaking Hawaiian in his age group. My dad's 86 today. And he was not allowed to speak Aulelo in his own home. And even though after my uncles, my dad was the oldest in his family, after several of his other younger brothers and sisters, they were allowed to speak, but he was not allowed. In fact, he told me stories where he was put in a closet, had to sit on rice kernels on his knees every time he would speak. So he grew up in a point where he never spoke Hawaiian, because the fear factor you was talking about, right? I speak, I go get my I go get in the closet, and I'm gonna be stuck all day, inside there all day with no language. I'm not gonna get food. I'm not gonna get water. So that was his thing. And even in the school system itself, that was the same thing. The teacher would, smack him on the hand, take the ruler, you go sit over there inside a corner. So he never learned to speak the language, level. So this day, he's like, he feels very, I want to say, like disconnected many times because like, I don't know. But we know that the language is what is your culture, right? But if you destroy the language, you destroy the culture. And by that part there, the degeneration, belittlement, insulting of him as a person speaking that language, he has a very low connectivity with a lot of the cultural aspects of Hawaii. He doesn't know. And he feels really bad that he doesn't know. But I just have to remind him, Dad, that's not your fault. That's not your fault.
With this kind of discussion and raising these issues, in the Waianae community, as an example, it poses to us the question, so what? Where do we go? How do we overcome? We recognize the challenges, but we shouldn't let the challenges stuck us. Yeah. So how do we overcome? And reason out, because through this kind of kuka, we can get down to the lower level of understanding. So what do we do? What do we say to all these old fuds, such as me? Hemo was able to hammer that idea and don't let it be a stumbling block, but raise it in discussions. Come face to face with these challenges.
I'd like to share my experience on how I view things differently. For me, it had to do with being in Aina. First, understanding the language, being able to speak it, but being in Aina allowed me to see what the words, big word, the little word, and the little word really meant to our kupuna in those spaces. And so my ohana on both sides, my mom and dad, Mormon on my mom's side, Christian on my dad's side. And so I had both worlds.
Which denomination?
And so, and hula dancer as well. And so I danced for Snowbird. I was like tugged, deeply tugged, and felt like I was doing wrong by my Christian side. And so I spoke to Snow and shared with her my feelings and that I needed to step back for a little bit to figure what's going on over here. And she understood. I went straight to Ka'ala and I sat down and I cried because I had no idea what I was feeling at that time. And I remember I remember hearing my Christian side speaking, so I thought, and my Hawaiian side speaking as well. And what I understood for me is, it is okay, one, for me, God made, Jesus made, Laka made, my environment. And so it's all one for me. And that allowed me to be able to, just like how you had your two rooms, I could do that now. And it opened up my perspective to realize that if I'm calling on Jesus, this is my Jesus and only my Jesus. Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that. My Jesus doesn't belong to anybody else. He's mine, right? And so with that perspective, I can actually look at everybody else's beliefs and religions and be open to, that is yours.
Yes, you're right.
That is yours. That is yours, right? On the Hawaiian side of it actually, amplified my love even more and my understanding even more for my cultural side of the many gods that we had. And I can find balance in that now. I'm not judgmental about anybody else's, you know what I mean? And so I'm gonna say language definitely is the key, one of the keys. And that's one thing, is like, okay, I gotta change my mindset, my narratives that I use in order to Poka through on both ways. I'll call on Jesus if I need to call on Jesus, but more often than not, I'm calling on Laka, I'm calling on Ku, I'm calling on Kane. And I've never done that before, right? Because I wasn't taught that.
What gave you the confidence to overcome?
The language,
It was through the language.
yeah, the language, definitely. And I cannot
Would you say
express.
some of the results?
I'm sorry?
Some of the results of calling upon calling upon Ku, calling upon Laka, the results that you got were
It worked.
it worked.
It worked.
Because better to call on Lono for the rain than ask Jesus to come do
It
something.
worked. Like I had a stroke in 2020, and immediately after the stroke, I went to my brain is farting right now. The healing hill up in
Oh, yeah.
went up there
Kalehua Hill.
with
Kalehua.
Jean Rodriguez. She took me up there,
That's the best place.
and I just started calling on Kane. The clouds started coming, like immediately, and it just started to rain on the both of us. Jamie was like, "Whoa, what was that about?" She had no idea. I didn't have really any idea, but I knew that I needed that for me. Yeah, and so, yeah, it works. You call on them no matter what, no matter who it is.
Nani, you
Call.
can share when we was Honokahua after we went.
Oh my gosh, that was another-
And we went to Cuba.
Yes, go ahead, share. Go share.
Also, we went, it was after Lahaina, the Infernos. In Lahaina, we went up because Kumu Kaulia, who's my classmate, he was holding one. He had an open kahea for all different religions. But it was a way to bless Lahaina and true multi-religions. So we went to Honokahua, and we gave ho'okupu to all the nakupuna over there. And then had them part in that process where we could go ahead and go by. But it started to rain, so nobody would go, but the five of us went. And everybody was on the kahakai, and then we went into Kanaloa. And it was great. It was slight drizzling, but as we went in as Kanaka, and then we started to do ehomai. And so when the first ehomai started to drizzle lightly, the second ehomai, the thing was getting heavier. When we did the third ehomai, the heavens just opened up and torrential rain just came down on us, and just was like hard, big drops for like maybe 40 seconds. And then after that, everything went.
Yeah. As soon as we were
everything went
done,
Yeah, everything went open
it was
up.
done.
And was clear after, So for us was a confirmation from, Na'akua and our Nakupuna.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm just gonna go back again. Language, aina, and continuation of the practices. Alright. That's how we actually move forward. Yeah. First, remembering, that allows us to remember who we are. But yeah, and just the continuation of speaking, of chanting as much as you can. That alone changes the no.
Like how Kalehua was saying, back in the day, Jesus, alright, Amo, as the Kanaka, alright?
Yeah, I love that.
So for my journey now, so when I put it, I be inclusive, I say Iyo, Yeshua, Nako, Nakupuna, Naumukua. That's in my daily pule. As before, when I was raised up in Halipule, Omana Kelkoa was nothing but Kelkoa me Yeshua. So now that's the difference.
But we also have to start to really change the narratives that we use. Right? That's a big thing for me. Changing the narratives is important as well. Right?
Yes. We'll go with Corey.
So I've been studying the colonization. I came home 8 years ago. I was born as a U.S. citizen here in an occupation. Got elected under EO in December. And the way I look at it is all this practices is all foreign because they come from pedophiles.
I'm sorry, you come from
Pedophiles
where?
who brought these religions
Come from
to
where?
us.
So a little louder because we can't hear.
So the colonization and the settlership and all that stuff, it comes from pedophiles. Pedophiles. The church, the state, government, and they're all foreign agents over here since the overthrow. So it's an ongoing, and so maybe it started with Christianity, like Mormonism. I was born in 1980, I live on California Avenue. I had everybody knocking at my door other than EO. So when I came back home, I never know the movement and the battle. I never even know Hawaii was overthrown and is occupied. Now I do know, but when we go and you look at the colonizers, they pretty much are okay with fucking kids. And I don't believe my God wants that for our people. You know, he always telling me, tell everybody what it is already. And who is taking the money? Who is using their foreign instruments? How come nobody can say no? How come we never create our own? Because we all prisoners of war. We all going through trauma. But one thing we should have in common, if we're talking about the future and the past, is our keiki. If you're not gonna protect the innocent from people who like to fuck kids, what does that say about your mental stability in this trauma? If you know can say no and tell everybody, no, I'm not taking the money, oh, I deserve this, I deserve that. But you guys aiding and abetting to the crimes that they're committing of genocide. That's the truth. So when you get all these stories by propagandists that giving you religion that is fallen and stolen and re-alchemized for centuries, ever since Manifest Destiny, then we have a lot of trauma to fix in all of us, not just the Kanaka, but in the extensions of us, because from what I believe in my research is, nobody is one Hawaiian native. How is a Hawaiian native the same as one indigenous unless it wasn't indigenous before and it was original before that?
Yeah.
I get the original DNA.
I think some of the sessions we went through kind of brings us to the point of understanding, like all of those questions that you might be having or going
I'm
through.
sharing.
Yeah,
Because the research is found.
from the beginning talks to now, we've progressed tremendously in building Ike to where we're at today. And I can hear some validation in some of the things you talk about, but we still have a lot of
Well, your petty kids going missing, yeah?
yes.
Okay, so that's what all I'm focused on right now. Because we know more future for our people if we keep letting them get shipped off,
Yeah.
both through the system and out of the system on the boats. My ministry's work has found a lot of information, so that's all colonizing stuff.
Yeah, and I feel like that ties into from the beginning, from us opening in the beginning of like, and I'm really glad that the conversation has gone this way. I wasn't expecting it, but it's nice. It's really good. And I think this is when we think about governance, like where do all of these learnings and all of these perspectives, how do they inform the governance itself? So that thing about nature, treating nature as God, what does that mean for like the policies and the society that gets built based on this worldview and the restoration of this worldview and the implementation of it? How do we then get to what governance looks like that is not American? If we are not American, then how do we create those policies through this worldview that protects children the way that the United States government is not protecting children, that protects immigrants in the ways that they're being, from the ways that
We
they're
had one more
now.
speaker there.
It's not about being American or Hawaiian, it's about being a non-citizen.
Not
It's
citizen
not
aware.
about policies and procedures. It's about uncitizenizing yourself to the corporation that you keep using or adhesion contracts will get money from them. So when you nationalize away from that, you become an enemy of the state. So when you stop using it, I don't use nothing. I don't make no money, no fiat, none of that stuff ever since I've been home. I don't use any of that money. I don't get any money. I don't take anybody's money. I don't take donations because I don't know what people's intentions are. But right now, in this war, if you read the laws of war, the international law, the Geneva, the Hague, and all of FM 27, all of these things, I don't know a little Hawaii, but I'm still connected to you. I don't know a little Hawaii, but I'm still connected to you. So there's no way that I cannot get to Akua just because I don't know my past or my family in the past. What I do know is that there is no immunity for anybody who's a civilian right now who's a citizen. Neither is the governor, the lieutenant governor, the police. No one has immunity right now.
No one has
No
what?
one.
What?
No one has
Immunity.
Immunities.
If you look at chapter 6 and 7,
No, I don't need to look at
in
the
the
chapter.
law,
What do
in
you
the
mean by
FM 26, talk about
immunity?
occupation, and then you look at the Geneva and Hague, and basically, we have the ability to be free right now if we want to take our country, nation, whatever we want back. But it's gonna take effort, because no immunity means they have no protection.
Who's gonna grant you immunities? What are you talking about, immunities?
Okay, so then I would read Geneva, Hague, and then the FM 27-10. All these things are terminologies. Right now, being that the guns in the police officers have badges and they believe they have immunity and the state is protecting them with a paycheck. We could kill them right now, literally. And we would have that right because for self-determination and life, we're not gonna wait till the fascist tells us when we can move forward, and they're not gonna give us enough money to take our country back. In my generation, we all know about the Illuminati and the cabal and how it all works with the sex trafficking and the trafficking. So it's not that hard to crack the code anymore. We're in a time where many of us have awakened to what we know we need to do. It's in your DNA, it's activating.
So and this is not meant to push back at all. It's not meant to do that. And I want to say this very kindly because I know it's gonna strike a nerve. I'm telling you. And because I'm gonna use this as an example, the concept of eel.
It's not a
I just have gotten you once.
No, what I'm sharing with you, and I'm just saying.
I don't need you to share.
No,
No,
we do.
No, but you,
We do.
you,
Yeah.
I am
this.
different. I am a different Kumu.
No, sweetheart.
Absolutely.
So we
I
just,
have a
yeah.
spirituality Pinui.
Oh, yeah. Okay. But what we're trying to, because I think what I'm going to circle back around to, that as a people, we don't have the power that you are professing. We know, because tonight, if I had a message, because I thought about what my participation is going to be, because if I talk about colonization, I think sometimes conversations get wrapped up in colonization and occupation, and I'm not that guy to get locked up in that conversation, because the word I use is domination. Now, we are being dominated. So we can, even if we tried to fight back, I guarantee you more violence would come in an amount and a quantity we cannot awamo that much violence.
Hold on, so I want to
I'm
pause.
just wearing a shirt.
No,
So I just want to
hey,
pause. I want to pause real fast. So I want Kalehua to finish his when I was on.
all I'm gonna get to
on
is
the-
it's important insofar as the next generation. I'm not gonna send them to war, and I'm a principal of a school. I'm not gonna send the children that are under my charge into violence. I'm gonna send them into inner peace. I'm gonna send them into a high level intellect and with the abilities to research and contemplate, which is why I brought up EO. Because it's not just about one source, or somebody told me it's about research. Our people and our kupuna left millions of pages of documentation that if you cannot access, we cannot just ramrod our own beliefs into public spaces. Because I'm going to say, the only reason why I challenge EO, because I read a lot, and I think and I cannot find it. I actually looked, and
Before it's coming out, man, it's like.
No, even-
Well, the eel is a hawk and it's almakua. It's written about. Like we're avoiding the actual. It's okay.
Can you hold on?
It's
Wait-
okay.
wait a minute.
It's okay.
Don't
because
interrupt.
what I'm trying
Please
to
don't
do
interrupt.
is
I'm trying to listen to
it's
him.
actionizing
Okay?
education
So stop
as a
interrupting.
mechanism by which our
Kelly.
children know how to.
I have
But
a child on Hawaii.
That's it.
absolutely
One
no. But
person-
no.
one person at a time, please.
I'm
One person at a time.
addressing the idea of how do our children, how does the next generation actually have tangible strategies and techniques to address the mourning and the grief that comes with the lifestyle. And I'm gonna say, America will send more violence than we are even comprehending. Guaranteed. Right. Okay, so now I'm saying let's fight with research. Let's fight with our language. Let's fight with our ceremonies. Let's fight with our practices. That's what we're talking about.
Also audio, video, right?
Uh,
By telling the truth, by showing
Okay.
people the metadata. You know, I'm talking about putting our kids in the law.
Okay, awesome, we got it. What's the next question that is gonna move us, because we're running out of time.
He wanted to share. Please do share.
Okay, I wasn't going to say nothing because I was kind of like, okay, where is going? I wanted to figure the next phase. But, kind of like to that point of, I was reading through the things that you wrote to Poka, like in terms of like the dreaming and envisioning what that nation looks like in the face of colonization. And it kind of made me think like, but was it the kupuna that already dreamed that when they made the kingdom, right? And then like in terms of like the language piece, like for me, like when it comes to that component, like one kupuna challenged me who was as we say Manaleo, but he told me I just speak Olelo Hawaii and I don't know Manaleo. I don't know. We never label ourselves, But he said, try read the Constitution and Aina as family. So like for me, it does. There is that it's figuring out how to translate some of these steps into like the legal power that gets us back to that original legal government again. But that's been one of the things that's been on my mind is just we recognize and everybody says it right, illegal occupation, but I don't know about this like necessarily always the steps, and I feel like we don't always have the diverse conversation like this to identify what are the legal solutions. But mahalo for the conversation. That's just a little bit of my reflection. Sorry.
We'll get rid of the legal period because it's all the colonizers. That's the cabal language. We release policy, procedures.
So what would you suggest would be the language to use?
What do I suggest?
What English words
Right,
would you
I
suggest
that When we
utilizing?
speak, they understand what we're saying. That's what I suggest. And then you can translate that into Olelo Hawaii. Because not everybody going to understand Olelo Hawaii that no more practice, right?
So you're suggesting that the use of anything that talks about direction or rules should be translated into Olelo Hawaii, but yet we
Or if
don't know
there is
the.
something in Olelo Hawaii that's already created and made up and can be interpreted for us, so we have a Olelo teacher.
So getting back to our kumu, the source, which
But in the
is
beginning, you gotta tell people in English because that's the most widely known language.
okay.
Yeah.
So we only have about, I want to say 15 minutes left before we gotta start wrapping up. And so maybe we do have a pretty large group, so I wonder if we just want to use the last 15 minutes to go around and reflect. Please take a picture later if you like to keep these for your notes. But I want to bring it back to the beginning of, as we're talking about all of the ways, and I think it really can be classified as like spiritual warfare, and the fact that all of the battles that we have in the material sense of like fighting capitalism, fighting the economic domination and exploitation and class warfare, all of these things in some ways can be considered a distraction in the sense of it's pulling us away from
The real conversation.
Yeah, from our relationship to ourselves as human beings, and how the connections to other people as human beings is the thing that empire is afraid of the most, and the thing that they target first. And so as we're talking about the spiritual warfares and the genealogy of the spiritual warfares that has led us to a place where we don't necessarily have like the critical mass to make yet. We don't have the critical mass yet to shift the status quo that we're seeing now that's creating so much violence and domination in our lives. how do we take what we've already discussed now, and imagine a future where the deoccupied kingdom is applying these principles of Aina as the source, Aina as God. I want to, I guess, put the question to everybody, and we can go around the circle.
Start with him.
Yes. So I want to, ask everybody if there's anything on your heart that you want to share before we close out, and anything on your heart specific to this thing of how do we implement these things that we've talked about in terms of reclaiming our humanity through the spiritualities and through connection to Aina? How do we translate that into what healthy governance looks like as a nation?
And let me also add, this is like the first in maybe another 20 sessions. We are not going to cover all the things we need to in the period that we have.
Yeah, we got like
So
hour
this
and a
one's
half.
coming around again.
But yeah, next month we'll have, but yeah, please begin.
Okay, so first of all, I want to thank Kalehua for his contribution and the depth that he was willing to take this conversation, which normally you don't find people willing to expose themselves or their thoughts to the depth that he had done. So mahalo for coming, and you should come back again. Now, my intention was to cover two aspects. One, colonization, and two, decolonization. And I've gone through 3 quarters of colonization and the steps taken by a person who is foreign to Hawaii, and yet as he shares these stages of colonization, it strikes right home to us and what we have been going through. And we have been, to a large extent, confused by the different religions being brought to Hawaii. And some would say, actually, some of these religions can clear the confusion that we have, especially with this interesting question of how does one become a Buddhist in Hawaii? Where's the Christian connection? No more. But it comes about, and we find, especially in the Nanakuli area, my wife, where did she come from to be a Buddha head? And my daughter is a very strong Christian, and I'm in between and watching them go ahead.
Poka, my wife, when we first met, my wife was a practicing Buddhist. My mother-in-law was a
Yeah.
Kanaka.
And
Okay.
we're same
So it goes
Religious
all over the place, yeah?
affiliation.
The other point that someone raised was, how is it that a person says, we are not Americans, this is not America? My wife had taken kids off to Iolani Palace, and she subsequently wrote a poem about detailing the trip to Iolani Palace. But in the last frame, she talks about being in the room that Liliuokalani was imprisoned, and how she tried to grasp, to hold on to be able to anchor herself to a place. And then she heard in her left ear a voice that said, "Epua, this is not America, and we are not Americans." Hawaii Pono'i. And that was about 7 years ago when she took that group to Iolani Palace. You still have the presence of spirituality that is right next to us. And all we need to do is, I guess, be sensitive to messages that we can hold for ourselves. So the paper on decolonization, decolonizing the mind, I think this topic was precisely what the paper and this discussion was supposed to be all about. In the process of decolonizing our minds, to challenge ourselves with all the many virtues and good sayings that we have, how do we select as we walk forward and determine our future course? And let us not forget the state motto, which is our national motto. Wamau ke o kaina i ka pono. Pono is what is at heart of all of this. And oftentimes we just flip it off. We forget that that saying exists for all of us. This last week I was at a meeting of the so-called highest thinkers of Hawaii, president of 2 banks, former justice of the Hawaii Supreme Court, many
Is that the
businessmen.
HEC meeting?
Yeah. And one of the topics that they are willing to discuss is the question, how does one decouple from the United States of America? How do we break the bonds and find new direction to go? If any of you are interested in working on the details of such a plan to be presented to them, let me know, get in touch with me, and let's see if we can put something together. So it's an interesting.
Oh, I just came alive.
That could be interesting.
Yeah. Okay, so
Decoupling.
that's my thoughts for this
Decoupling, yes, I've heard that
evening,
word.
and I want to thank all of you just for being here and participating in this discussion.
Oh, I don't know.
Lynette?
In the words of the Poka, yeah? Emancipate yourselves from mental slavery, not but ourselves, and free our minds.
Yeah.
This is my comment for decoupling. You don't need to decouple. Eat them. That is to say, you expand
Yes.
and you bring them in. You don't have to
Well, when you
disconnect.
have the hokulea tied to the USS Greenville, a nuclear
Not a
warship.
good, not a good visual.
Oh.
No, we gotta decouple, we cannot stick with them guys.
Who made that
I don't know,
image?
give
Huh?
us indigestion if we eat them.
Eat them.
Yeah, who made that image?
Me,
Of the- oh.
me, we're gonna hammer that
Yeah.
link, let them go on their own,
Yes,
that nuclear powered ship.
absolutely.
Okay, anyway, I took enough
Okay.
time.
So
Thank you.
briefly, what I learned, and I guess they're gonna go around, that everybody's in a process right now of hybridization. Some people are Christian, some people believe in Jesus but are not Christian. Some people see him as a person and as a model. And I don't know where we all are, but I don't think we need to name it necessarily. What we need to do is act it. Just do it, you know, and then people can tell.
That's right.
So you can talk about your religion, or you can watch how you act. And if you act like assholes, no, you're not. So that would be like my takeaway from tonight. Everybody's in a different place, but I'm really appreciative of the ideas that came up, because I know we need to do this more than once. And since we run the program, we're doing this one again.
Yeah.
Follow up.
Didn't somebody ask Gandhi if when he thought of Christianity, and he said that comment of like, well, I'm sure, I think Christianity is really interesting, I've just never met a Christian. And so, I think it's really good idea, I just never met one. Anyway, go ahead.
Talk to yourself. Give me that thing.
So, I guess for me, the exertion, like Kalehua was suggesting, that the exertion of energy is wasted upon trying to determine your ideology. And really, as a Kanaka, like, no more time for that. We gotta continue. As Sister is suggesting, there's a lot of kids being hurt. There's a lot of kupuna being hurt. And if we in the dilemma of trying to figure out whether or not we were walking this side or this side, how are we addressing the needs of our people? We're not. So either you get it together and get back onto the road, you gotta hope on everything so that we can do the work, because there's a lot of work to be done. And so for me, coming here, I'm really interested in the pathways forward. Like, I don't have time for argue about EO. and no more time for argue about Kanaloa. The existence of all these things are represented in the spirituality that I have practiced all of my life. And so let's move forward, because when I see Kupuna sleeping on the side of the road and nobody going there to take care of them, something is wrong. Something is wrong.
I always share our experiences forms our understanding, forms our perspective. Right? And so I love these types of sit downs and talk story because we don't do this enough. And we need to. In order for us to understand your experiences, your perspective. I just do the dang thing. Just speak the language, learn the language, get in the land. I try to be as balanced as possible as you can, and people can come.
Research.
You can show that aloha, continue to show that aloha and what it really means, what Auntie Pilahi Paki really understood those words to me, the depth of those words, and you try to live through that. Aye. People will see things through you in a different light. Yeah. I'm a firm believer in the language, and I can only say it because I speak it. And you'll only understand it if you speak it too. Bottom line. Yeah.
Okay. Pass.
Yeah.
Pass. Any?
I'd just like to thank everyone for being here and sharing, and also I affirm the language is very important, and I have just begun delving into it after all of these years. It's something that I've wanted to do, and so I've started. And if that can encourage anyone else, I would love that.
Just mahalo to the kumu in the room and to everyone for kuka kuka and sharing. You know, we're all teachers and learners, and appreciate the space that supported us.
Oh, back at it. If I get to say something, I just like mahalo everybody here for this the depth and the range of the conversation tonight. Tonight is graduation night at Waina High School. There's loads of cars going out. It's nice to see how many people are here tonight holding this conversation. This is 20 plus people, and this is not the kind of discussion that's generally open at often different places. So I really appreciate this, and I appreciate everybody's input. However diverse and it may seem, sometimes we gotta say stuff, and it's okay. It's okay. So mahalo for this opportunity and space. Mahalo.
I would like to say the same thing. Mahalo to everyone for allowing us to come and speak. Kumu, sir, appreciate you. Thank you, Nani. Appreciate it. And I gotta also just say that I think it's important that we continue to build on any progress, not to take anything personal, any assault that maybe as a personal that's how we air what we need to get out, because sometimes we all I don't like say nothing because I don't like twinkle on somebody's toes or something like that, yeah. But we just gotta be willing to hear and have an open ear and an open mind and an open heart to really understand. Sometimes it's the pain that we all feel, yeah. And we gotta let that manifest itself, let that come out, and then we can all grow from understanding that pain. Because if we keep it in, then we're not solving any problems, yeah, by not speaking about it. And when you have an opportunity, we can at least speak and feel comfortable enough in a room like in this environment where we can feel comfortable speaking to everybody, where we're not going to take it as a personal affront. I get mad at you, you get mad at me. We go outside in the parking lot, we're still beefing or something, No, we can leave here with our hearts at peace and our mind at peace, knowing that we can speak and talk to each other without having to feel that fear, right? Because a lot of times the actions will come out of fear or be generated out of that fear. So I appreciate it. Mahalo, mahalo, mahalo.
Mahalo for having this and inviting us, and thank you for opening up the dialogue, because it's a very important dialogue. Obviously, everybody at the table knows it's a very important thing that needs to happen. And for the ones that I know that this has been a topic since I've come home, and we should end it. We should figure out how to end it this year, because there are ways, if we know what to read, we know how to come together, we know how to explain it to everyone. But if we read the information, that could help us bring knowledge, and whether it's past, whether it's present, the visions that are coming for the future. Protecting the keiki is the ultimate for me. I can only stand with people who go in kapu the keiki, you know what I mean? Because at the end of the day, we're not gonna have a future. We can keep talking about the past, but we're the adults. We should handle what we need to get done during our lifetime, so we don't leave it for them. They don't need to fight the war.
Aloha.
Aloha.
Mahalo for letting me be here. I'm not Kanaka, but my children are, and I have 3 beautiful Kanaka boys, and I'm very proud of them. But they all get good jobs, they get families, they get everything, but they're very Americanized. They don't know it, but I know it. And so I'm trying to learn all that I can and be an example for them so that they can learn too and come and help with this fight, with moving forward, you know? And so I'm trying to learn so I can be an example for them.
Mahalo.
Thank you.
Aloha, Ka'iolani. What my takeaway is I realized a lot of people have a lot of bloodline work, trauma that is anchored within your DNA, and it manifests within these timelines as our challenges. And until we push through those fears, they will continue to manifest. They are anchored in the past and the trauma of our kupuna. And because we are part of them from inception of all time immemorial, they remain within us. And the moment we heal their traumas, we then get to experience a different manifestation of another kupuna. And the traumas that remain within our bloodline are the struggles we face today. So every fear and every trauma that we walk through every single day is because the person before us didn't heal it. And therefore it sits within our DNA coding. So if I can heal something today, I instantaneously heal aspects within fractal lines of my DNA, of my kupuna. And I also, with generations in front of me, I instantaneously prevent them from reliving those traumas that are anchored within our DNA. And so, as I have been spoken directly to in my spiritual journey, we are all called by name for certain aspects within the restoration of that connection back to your anointed places. It's all in our everyday journey. We cannot tell other people what to experience. We cannot tell them what to believe, except as we are so called, because we are chosen for specific pieces of this decolonization. We're all chosen specifically for a kuleana. Some people are born into this timeline and this avatar because there's more than just this. It's not a human experience. We are star seeds. And as star seeds of different locations within the universe, we've come here to activate, heal, push through, and manifest that which is one. That's what I was shown and told. And we have to just follow that specific journey and find the people on that vibrational frequency. Because as we find the puzzles within our same frequency, we amplify that mana to then push through and heal the bloodline traumas. And they continue to loop because It's not a fight of blood. That cannot happen. That absolutely cannot happen. This work for me is every day as a kumu with the haumana and a kumu for our people. I sit in circles like this, so much so it gets tiring to hear the same anos that come to the table about how come. Through colonization, it has separated us from that piko of our kuleana, that piko of our bloodline. We cannot change our Allah. Just sharing from the perspective of what I was shown. I've seen reptilians in Lahaina. I was taken astral travel 5 days after Lahaina. I watch bodies burn in seconds, souls jump out, and there's reptilians ready to take their mana out of fear. Because fear is a manifestation of our traumas, and different species feast on those fears. So we are here with an interpool of star seeds, all trying to find their way. And blessed be the journey. Push through your fears, and holomo.
Oh man, the camera make me all nervous. Kind of weaving from that, in a sense, one of the things that Mahalo Poka, because you bring up this point in terms of like how these present conditions have resulted in all these behaviors that we now need to address, right? But one of the things that like has been kind of stewing in my mind is, what are the ingredients that we need in order to shift those conditions that enable newer behaviors, that don't make that so challenging, like how you guys mentioned previously, in previous conditions, we may not have even had to have some of these arguments or discussions. And so that's kind of one of the train of thoughts that I've been kind of leading on. And then the other thing I've been thinking about too is, in terms of the urgency, right, to take action within even just the next year, is how we're really watching the conditions of the planet change, geopolitically speaking, in terms of a new multipolarized world that we haven't seen in decades. I can't even imagine it because I wasn't around for the previous changes. But really thinking about where does the kingdom fall and what are the things that we need in our toolkit mentally, actionably, relationally, in order to really go about making sure that we're elevating ourselves, the Pacific, if not Hawaii, for the world, to in thinking about what this new age might even look like. Yeah, so not too much solutions, but definitely rethinking. So thank you. Yeah.
I'm good. Thank you, though.
Well, thank you very much for providing this opportunity and opening this conversation. Maybe people can understand where other people are coming from and develop some empathy. Other than that, everyone, please drive safely tonight so we can have this again later.
Mahalo all everybody, all everyone for coming and sharing. What I got out of this, a lot of personal self-reflection stuff, my own struggles with trying to identify as Hawaiian and fighting myself all the time, fighting myself through not having the opportunities to learn the language and then feeling ousted by not being able to speak it in community that do, and then pushing back against that. And then but also that's why I think I gravitated more toward the political activism stuff. And then in a roundabout way, it's leading me back to the culture, to the language, to the aina and everything. So it's kind of big thanks to that lady over there. Helped me out a lot in my life. But also it's interesting how Kalehua grounded stuff, because with the religion stuff, because my great-grandmother was Hattie Domingo. She used to heal people on the Hakanu side. Hattie Domingo, Grandma Hattie. And then she also taught Mother Auntie Momi in Wahiwa, right? But then in their house, every room would have a cross with Jesus on top, with Jesus stuff all over. So I was like, I used to always wonder why, but then kind of makes sense. Like they're more open, they're more understanding of this kind of stuff, where we're kind of more structured. Yeah. But thank you. That's what I kind of got out of all this. Thank you for the space.
Yes, thank you again for doing an excellent presentation. I learned a whole lot.
And only one page.
Yeah, I know.